Good evening, everyone. Welcome to a brand new episode of System Link. I'm your host, Jonathan Garrett from Burly Media, and joined, as always, by my jolly co-host, Mike Hazelton from the Xbox Guide. Mike, how you doing?
Hey, yeah, I'm good, thanks.
We're
How are you?
back. So,
Yeah,
take
that never
two.
happened.
Yeah, I know. Take two. We did actually start shooting this episode a few moments ago. Had some technical wonkiness, but we've now sorted that out. Hopefully, we're sounding and looking all right. Good evening, everyone. Davo in chat as well. Good to see you, man. And Plug Socket jumping in. Yeah, he just clocked the kill zone in the background. Brilliant. I mean, yeah, such a great... we were talking about this off air. Such a great box art for that game, and just generally all of the trailers and visual design for that
Great
title.
game.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sorely missed. I really hope Sony course correct on that, and we see that, even if not made by Guerrilla, we see that IP picked up elsewhere. We have a lot to talk about tonight. We have a number of some pretty big headlines that have been dropping over the last 48 hours that we'll get to. Plus, our deep dive this evening is going to be on Phil Spencer's Bloomberg article, where he specifically stated there is no red line where it comes to ports of Xbox titles now appearing on other platforms. There is no franchise that's off limit. It's forced Mike and I to completely revisit all of our previous predictions and points from previous system links. I know that, Mike, you mentioned, didn't you say when we were off air, that you'd watch back a couple of clips from previous episodes just to check in?
Yeah, I wanted to see the statements that we've made
Yeah.
about what we thought was going to happen, and so yeah, be good to
Wildly off
revisit
base.
that.
Yeah, so
Well, yeah,
it's interesting, but it is interesting to go to dive into that. Plug Socket just mentioning they're back on Killzone. I've got Killzone 2. Haven't played it, mostly because it shut down the online. I cannot recommend that campaign enough. Those single player stories in those games were awesome. Killzones 1, 2, and 3 I was obsessed with. And I was probably one of 12 people that bought Killzone Mercenary on the Vita and adored that game as well. So please do check that out. Plug Socket, I'm getting an ad. Help me. We've come back online. You will see 30 seconds of ads, and I will take 2 cents of revenue from that. So, first headline tonight. We're going to start diving into these now. Death Stranding. Port confirmed, finally coming to Xbox. Looks great. Looked great on the PlayStation. Looks great on Xbox. Kojima obviously has signed the deal with Xbox. They're producing OD for Xbox. Not really quite sure what that game is. Kind of feels a little bit experimental and a bit odd. I think it's sort of perhaps a little bit harder to contextualize what that's going to look like. But Death Stranding is a very known property, with the second one obviously PlayStation exclusive and PC as well. Really cool to see this make its way to Xbox, and another example of how those walls are really coming down. Timed exclusivity, particularly for these second-party partnerships, seems to be the go-to method. We've seen varying versions of that, Stray with at least a year's exclusivity, or 2 perhaps, Sifu as well, now Death Stranding. In reverse, you've got then obviously Microsoft porting various titles to PlayStation, Hi-Fi Rush, Sea of Thieves, and of course Indiana Jones, which will be coming out within 3 months of its launch at the end of this year. So yeah, Death Stranding on Xbox. It's a pretty cool thing to see, and nice to see that also that relationship and that partnership with Kojima Productions is continuing to bear fruit. Do you have any history with this, Mike, at all? Do you have any sort of knowledge of Death Stranding, or any kind of interest in picking it up?
I certainly had interest in it,
Mm.
and I'm interested. I'll probably get it on Xbox because it's like £18 or something. It's a crazy price.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is great. And I wanted to ask, are you confident that Death Stranding 2 will be PlayStation exclusive now that Kojima's got the IP?
Yeah, the fact
Back?
that he has the IP obviously now is a huge deal. Given his long-standing also breakup with Konami and Metal Gear Solid, it's nice that he's retaining ownership of that. No, I don't think it will remain exclusive. But then, my predictions have been unearthed and disproven a great deal over the last few weeks. I think Death Stranding 1 is as a dipping the toe. It tests the water to see if there's interest in it and any audience for it on another platform, given that it is a few years old now. It certainly sets up an easy port if they've already worked with the Decima engine on Xbox, and there isn't any sort of, because traditionally that was Guerrilla Games, that was Horizon, that powers Death Stranding. So I think it's a way for them to just take a punt, give it a go, see how it's received on Xbox. It certainly opens the door. I would imagine that Death Stranding 2 will retain its at least a timed exclusivity, probably for a year. That typically seems to be the Sony deals, before we see anything on that jump over to Xbox. But yeah, definitely an indication that they are keen to explore publishing those previously exclusive games elsewhere. So
Yeah, I mean, I saw it's supposed to hold up really well on Series S, which is nice. They've obviously done a bit of work. I think it was a really well optimized game anyway, but
Yes.
they've obviously done a bit of work making it suitable for that. And yeah, the pricing was just a bit of a surprise. I mean, the whole thing was obviously came out of nowhere
Mm,
on the day the PS5 Pro launched as well, which I
I know.
feel like it's the sort of thing that would happen to Xbox. You know,
Mm.
they'd have a big story and then something would go to PlayStation,
Yeah,
or it was a bit of a weird one.
weird to see that narrative
Um,
flipped, right?
and I'm sure they could have sold it for at least like 30 or 40
I was
quid. So the
expecting
fact that
40.
they launched
Yeah.
18 or whatever it was is really good. I know it's only only a limited time deal, but you'd expect it to at least return to this sort of price, you know, in the sales and stuff.
Mm.
So I'll certainly try to get it in the next few weeks. I'm not entirely sure if it's going to be for me because you know, there's quite a lot of repetitiveness, and I know elements of it are like you're supposed to enjoy the environments and enjoy the slog, but I don't know if I will
Mm.
actually enjoy it. So, but for you know, for the price, I think I'll give it a go. I've never heard you talk much about it.
No,
Do
I
you
don't. I
have
don't have a
history with it?
particular history with it. It's among quite a few PS4 exclusives that at the time just passed me by. Otherness kind of ended up being a priority. So there's actually a few big hitters like um, Spider-Man is one of them. Spider-Man 2 I hadn't played at all, or Miles Morales. I played the first game. Horizon is another one that I haven't particularly given a huge amount of time to. I played the first game a little bit, but maybe got like 2-3 hours in. And then Horizon 2 I haven't touched. So there's a few games that I've kind of got simmering. There, Ghost of Tsushima is another one where I've kind of, again, it was like a bit of a false start. I've got
What
a
have you
few of
been
those.
playing? Just playing The Last of Us over and
Just
over
playing
again.
Last of Us, you know what I mean? So I just a few that I've kind of ended up just skipping. And now they have PS5 definitive versions, and several of them are either PS5 Pro boosted or they have an official patch. I feel like I'm like at the perfect moment to now dip back into a backlog, play these definitive versions of these games. I tell you, with Ghost of Tsushima, what actually happened was that they released a co-op mode for it. I never got it at launch. I picked it up about a year later after it came out in a sale, and they added the Legends mode, which was this entire. They had like a PVE co-op mode that they added with like various different options within there, and I loved it so much. I was obsessed with it, playing it with my friend Johnny online. I ended up not touching the campaign at all because we were just hammering the multiplayer and having such a good time with it. So I know I've got that sitting there ready to go. Death Stranding's another one. My wife and I were kind of planning on going through it together. It's on our list. It's on our never-ending backlog list of games to get to. So I've kind of also squirreled that away for us. We're still working our way through Banishers at the moment. So it's in there. It's going to be on the list, and certainly something I'd be willing to pick up. I think it's actually on PS Plus at the moment. It's on the extra and premium tiers, so you can get that as part of their sub. So, Big Manny, oh, you're back. I didn't get the notification. Yeah, so Twitch only sends out one notification every 3 hours. So if you stream like twice within a 3 hour period, you won't get a push notification sent for that second stream. So that'll be why you didn't see us pop up on your phone. Yeah, I love the shadow enemies and the special enemies. Oh, I love that you've played that plug socket. That's really great. Yeah, we were obsessed with that. So, yeah, Death Stranding definitely on my list to investigate, potentially either on PS5 Pro or now, obviously, that incredibly good price on Xbox is very enticing. I know in the past we've been quite critical of Xbox for the way they have shown their games and us wanting, particularly Indiana Jones, to see some meaningful extended footage. And suddenly, out of nowhere, we're getting within a few days of each other, we're getting both an Indiana Jones deep dive, which I really enjoyed, actually. It didn't hide the jank, and I actually liked it more for that. Because there was a little bit of ropiness with some of those animations, but in some ways that was quite charming. I kind of feel like it's a nice solid swimming in sevens, which I don't know if Xbox need a swimming in sevens right now. I think they need something a bit more
I think
move the needle, but I think it has its place, right?
so. I've before watching this, I've been quite negative on Indiana Jones. Like negative to the extent that swimming in sevens is accurate. I think if it's sevens, that's no good for. Yeah, it's got to be eights or nines for it to be classed as a success. But watching this deep dive, really, I think it looks really good. It just reminds me so much of the old films,
Yes.
with the ropiness as well, because you know they're a
Yeah.
bit hokey, and the music is spot on, and just everything about it reminds me of the classic Indiana Jones
The
films, which I think is
original
exactly the
three,
audience they're going after.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's
Um,
set within that, isn't it? I believe it's set between two of the films.
I think so.
Which
Yeah.
one? I always get the order of those Indiana Jones films wrong as well. They're the original three. Shout out to
Yeah. I mean,
Troy.
I'm not a super fan, but
Yeah,
I do enjoy them.
shout out to Troy Baker. I mean, that is Harrison Ford that he's like. It feels like he's doing. It's more than an impression. He's actually.
It's pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like I'd say more than half the time it's fairly indistinguishable.
Yes.
Sometimes you can tell like it's just Troy Baker, but
Yeah.
pretty really good. And I'm glad they did that rather than because I think when they announced it, I thought, are they going to have to use a different likeness? Is it going to be, you know, are they going to try and clone Harrison Ford, or are they going to do something completely different? And they've I think they've done the right thing in basically trying to copy Harrison Ford.
Yes.
So yeah, we got like this bit, the classic moments that are kind of they've managed to fit into this game, even though it's a different storyline. All the stuff you'd expect from Indiana Jones.
Totally.
I think you know, it's unlikely to be like set the world on fire, but I think it will be very solid. And I think it will live and die by kind of the puzzles and the story as opposed to the combat. Because the combat seems, I was a bit worried, but the combat seems like such a minor part of the game, especially based on this.
Yes,
footage,
and I've read some of those previews, them sort of acknowledging how you rarely have many bullets, if any, at any point. So it's deliberately sort of you kept in short supply. One thing that I've now kind of settled on is I don't like the third person shift when you're using the whip to climb up something or traversing something. I kind of the way they've handled the first person animations, which again feels very Machine Games, feels very Wolfenstein for them. I wish they just kept it first person the whole time. I don't need that camera pull out. I get why they've done it. I get that you're seeing the character model, it's immersing outside of the cutscenes. But I just as a personal preference, I kind of whatever you go with, first or third, pick a lane for me, and that's something I wish that we'd seen that sort of made a decision on. I do understand where they're coming from, why they did it, but yeah. Plug socket breaking down in there, just all of the different aspects of the Ghost of Tsushima Legends mode that he'd beaten. Big Manny, I wish they got 82-year-old Harrison Ford to do the mocap. Yeah, can you imagine how grumpy he would be? He's already having to play Red Hulk in the new Captain America film with the silly suit on. But imagine him having to be on a mocap stage doing this. I just think that would be a bridge too far. I remember reading somewhere, it might have been Harrison Ford, someone at Lucasfilm, Kathleen Kennedy, one of the producers, I'm not sure who, but I remember them saying that the most recent Indiana Jones was the last film, and that they weren't going to be recasting him or doing like a younger version. Indiana Jones is done because they felt that Harrison Ford was the definitive version. So for them to have his likeness in this and Troy Baker doing such a spot-on... I think an impersonation sort of does him a disservice actually here, because he's actually... I feel like he's really emoting in the way that you'd expect Harrison Ford to in this character. His performance really anchors this game for me. So really great to have that in there. And actually these moments, seeing him sort of picking out the pages and you see the animation of him actually grabbing it and the rat coming from the skeleton, it all just feels very, very sort of classic era trilogy Indiana Jones. So I think this is what we've been missing. Not quick cut stuff, but extended sequences of gameplay that don't suddenly jump to a cutscene for 2 minutes. We're seeing actively the traversal, the puzzle solving, the combat, and the animations all tying together. And also the HUD. It was nice to see so many of the pop-ups and the menus and just getting that inside look. When they've done that for Avowed, I think that might have been the last deep dive we saw. It was really effective and got me way more interested in that game because it was shown very explicitly. And that's exactly what you need, I think, with a title like this.
Yeah, I have to say, like, I prefer this to we'll come to South of Midnight, and it's a special case, South of Midnight, because it's set in a very personal it's got a very personal setting to people on the development team, and they have to handle it quite sensitively and make sure they do their research and stuff. Whereas this is kind of a Todd Howard likes Indiana Jones, so he's making an Indiana Jones game. It's not really the same sort of thing where it helps to really have an in-depth interview with the developers and things. Obviously, there's stuff about they're all fans of Indiana Jones and stuff, but where we've had a lot of, I feel like they've shown development or developer diaries before they've shown decent gameplay, and we've had that with South of Midnight, where we had that. But to be fair, it was quite a good gameplay segment that we saw whenever it was Gamescom or in the summer. But then to follow it up with like a developer diary where I think most people would want to see more gameplay for South of Midnight, because we still don't really know much about it at all. I don't know if it's quite the right order to do it in. And we had it with Indiana Jones. We had like a trailer for Indiana Jones, and then we had like a dev diary before we even really knew is it like a combat heavy machine games kind of thing, or is it a story game? And we've had it with Avowed and stuff. As much as I think it's good that they get the developers involved a lot in this stuff, I think there's something to be said for just showing the game and then kind of having that stuff as extra content for people who are really into the game to find out more about it. But
I think that's fair, particularly in the case of South of Midnight, which I feel like is a much more unknown quantity, given that it's a new IP from a team that's been been working away at this for a while. Indiana Jones felt like a fairly known quantity, and we kind of knew roughly what to expect from that kind of, if they're going to go for an authentic experience in the era that it was set in, we kind of knew what that was going to look like once they'd confirmed, obviously, that it was first person over third. This, I think, I think it's nice that they're peeling back the curtain a little bit, just from an interest, just being interested perspective. And actually, the big confirmation for me was that big crocodile from the gameplay trailer actually features in gameplay as a boss, which was a really nice sort of insight into the fact that we're actually going to get more sort of closed off combat encounters with then more open traversal. That was kind of my big takeaway from that. I saw Paris Lily from Kind of Funny confirm a few details from the recent press event as well. They're targeting 60 frames on X and S, so there'll be a performance mode. It's going to be roughly 12 hours long. They're also going to be giving players the option of turning off the stop motion animation during gameplay, but it will be retained during cutscenes. I really like that, although I know for some people they just won't enjoy that feel and that look, and that's fine. This is, as has been prior to this, it's been high on my list of probably most anticipated actually for next year. I can't wait. I just think this is exactly the kind of game I've been looking for. And I do appreciate these extended looks. So this sequence right now from our trailer that we cut from the recent doc, where they just did the quick cuts to some of the environments and showing a little bit of that variation. It wasn't just swampy. We sort of got some different looks and some different color palettes there too, with some of the extended cast were introduced to. Just great to see them be so explicit with this stuff, and I think it's very, very promising, certainly going into next year. Another one, and actually you recently put a post up on Threads about this, was Stalker 2. I think this is looking phenomenal. What a get for Xbox to have this on Game Pass as a second-party partnership. I've been hoping for another sort of Unreal Engine 5 showpiece. The Finals was and is still, I think, top of my list in terms of leveraging that tech. But that's a multiplayer game with a very, very specific focus. To have a single-player narrative game, and I believe single-player only. There isn't any other modes in this, is there? I don't believe.
Well, I was reading. I think there's a competitive mode coming after launch.
Post-launch. Okay, cool.
But I literally, it came up in on the news aggregator. I think it was The Verge, possibly doing a thing like, "Does Stalker have co-op?" And obviously it doesn't. And then they said, "But there's a competitive mode coming." But I'd have to double check. But I could see it working really well in this setting, and the doing quite well.
Yeah, for sure.
Obviously not a priority, and they'll probably port it to PlayStation first. You would have thought.
Maybe that's where it gets launched with, maybe. And then it's cross-play, it's open, and they've got an instant player base there. Second win of a news cycle when it gets released over there.
Yeah, they've done a great. This trailer was quite cool because it was focused on guns, so maybe it's not the best one probably to showcase the game, but I do like the attachments for all the guns. You can kind of customize them really heavily, and I think they've got like a under barrel shotgun on the sniper rifle and things for like when
that's so
people sneak up
cool.
on you and stuff.
Really sort of makeshift and feeling like you're struggling to survive. I love that kind of overall feel and that vibe. So nice.
Yeah, and they so I only played the first one very sporadically. My brother played it through, so I remember watching him, and the vibe of this, even though it's in Unreal Engine 5, which can potentially make things feel a bit samey. I mean, we've had that problem with Unreal Engine in the past, but it really captures the feel of the first game. And I think obviously the developers are Ukrainian, and it looks like Ukraine, and it looks like the kind of stuff you see from
Mm.
Ukraine in the news. They've done a really nice job with the environments, and everything seems very grounded and gritty and realistic.
Yeah. And actually, this is another case where, for me, them letting it cook has paid off in spades. I mean, recently with Space Marine 2, got a 9-month delay out of 2023, and that game launched ready. Coming out in September
Yeah,
earlier this year, it was polished, and I feel like these guys, they have some additional real world context that's obviously affected them, understandably. But regardless of what the impetus was going in, the benefit that this has had, that they've reaped the benefit of them taking the extra time, I think, to get this ready. And that is just, yeah, it's just really, really exciting. It's a nice sort of, I think, and we'll get obviously to our deep dive later, but it's nice to have a bit of not just one good news moment. I feel like the showcase, obviously, in the summer was that good news moment. And then we just had studio closures and game cancellations and just things that have just then chipped away at that enthusiasm. We've had a sustained burst now of some really good showings of Game Pass games and either timed or permanent exclusives. Just kind of reshaping that narrative a little bit, which is really nice to see them doing that and having that success. Following that, I've got within this same news period, and it's all related to this, is we get another Activision game. The Spyro Collection dropped onto Game Pass, which is great to see that that's actually now finally a thing. It's kind of the drip feed has been quite frustrating as a consumer from this. I think perhaps the Bethesda buyout gave me a skewed expectation of, they just did the big dump, didn't they? Like 20 games went on Game Pass. It was like
what?
felt like a real event.
Why do you think they're drip feeding
I don't
like
know whether
this?
there's legality to that. Maybe they're trying to duplicate the CMA by not sort of, if there's some sort of bizarre behind closed doors contractual obligation to not suddenly put a bunch of these IP on a subservice. Or it's them trying to address their release cadence. Phil Spencer mentioned in the Bloomberg interview that Avowed's delay was actually more about spacing out releases than it was about final quality. I think Black Ops 6 potentially threw a wrench in that, in their plans for that, because of just how
Well,
big that title was,
I wanted to say on Stalker, like it's good that they haven't, didn't insist that Stalker moved. It's probably not their place to move Stalker because it's not their franchise.
Mm.
But it's obviously quite a crowded window. It feels like a pretty busy couple of months for Xbox. But I'm glad that Stalker's coming. I think it's got a place.
Yeah,
It's got a place there.
no, for sure. Because if you think of, with Towerborn only having its early access release on PC now, when it came out last month, versus obviously what's going to happen in 2025, pushing Avowed over there as well has meant that we've kind of those four big Game Pass hitters being Black Ops 6, Flight Sim, Stalker, and then Indiana Jones. That's a nice varied wrap up with some big hits towards the end of the
I don't
year.
know.
So yeah,
Yeah, I feel like South of Midnight must be relatively close. Because we've seen a big variety of gameplay now, and obviously they've done well, it seems like they've done all the mocap and the voice
yeah.
acting and stuff based on the video today. So
I could see that being a summer release
yeah,
potentially. I think it's first 6 months. If you got Avowed in February, he says with half
yeah.
confidence, and then the next Doom game I believe is March, or certainly the first quarter of the year, March or April, somewhere around that kind of time. So that's then obviously another big drop, and then South of Midnight in the summer. You'd hope then you'd get that final punch with Fable at the end of the year. That would be amazing. Is there anything else we have confirmed for 25?
Good question. I'll have a look.
Fable, South of Midnight. I don't
Um,
think Gears is it? Gears is still further out than we
no,
thought. Probably 26. I can't imagine we're seeing Everwild unless they're suddenly ready to pull the trigger on that thing. Um, Perfect Dark again is unconfirmed for its release window. State of Decay is unconfirmed release window. Um, so
I
actually,
wondered if
yeah,
with Spyro, because I know with Crash Bandicoot they had to get like negotiate the cloud streaming from Ubisoft. I don't know if it's essential that they have cloud streaming for Game Pass. Probably for first party games, you would think they, basically want them to be available on the cloud. So it may be, I don't know if Spyro is cloud enabled, but possibly it's something like that was holding it up. I can't see anything else on the list. Oh, Yeah. No, I think yeah, just the ones you
Yeah.
said.
So that kind of shapes
Mm.
up quite nicely, then, doesn't it? The kind of this backup part of the year. You almost feel like if they want to reframe that narrative completely, just give us something big at the Game Awards. We'd speculated maybe a handheld reveal, but we've seen now that Spencer's sort of said, quite clearly it's further out than we think. It's not going to be that sort of, we were predicting that next gen would kick off with a next gen console and a handheld as the options. If the earlier start to the gen is correct, if that's what we can expect, from them. So yeah, I kind of feel like a Game Awards something would be really nice. Give us a date on something that we don't know. Maybe one more 2025 game. We know that Fable, South of Midnight, Doom are the confirmed for next year. If we got State of Decay or Perfect Dark or Gears or something that would just give us one more game, that's a game a quarter, which was old Booty's plan, wasn't it? One game from first
I mean,
party a
State of
quarter.
Decay has to be close, surely.
I don't
That's
know.
taken them,
I
unless because we talked about this, unless they're keeping the team size small and they're just taking their time, so they don't like spend 400 million making a State of Decay game, which is fair enough if that's how they want to do it. That's fine. But if it's a team of like hundreds of people and it's taken them however many years to make the next State of Decay, it's just a bit
Yeah.
crazy.
Well,
But
whatever the sort of financial makeup of their studio is, and like you said about team size, they only recently, with the last State of Decay 2 update, said we've now moved this team over to State of Decay 3, which has just entered full production. So that
yeah,
I think that's further out. I think that's further out, and I
yeah,
think
I
both
agree.
things can be true. Actually, I think they are trying to control team bloat with that in that sense and try and prevent the budget from sort of ballooning too much. Equally, I
Well,
don't think it's ready for next year. I think we see that in
I mean,
26.
Phil's been playing Everwild. Rare have been working on Everwild for the
Mm.
same amount of time as State of Decay, at least longer.
Did he do a visit
Um,
to Undead Labs, or was it Fable that he
no,
visited? Was it Fable and Everwild, wasn't it, that he visited in the UK? It was Playground Games, wasn't it, I think?
yeah, I don't know
Um,
where Undead Labs are based.
I think
North
it's the
America
States. I
somewhere, I
think they're in the
think.
States, yeah.
Yeah,
So, yeah, no, I think I think this is kind of just a way of them wrapping up 2024 with a positive note. Really great content for Game Pass. We can't say we've been starved for content in the last few months for that. And obviously alongside some big releases that have come out, just generally from third parties across the board. Big thing for, obviously, a huge release for Sony recently was the PS5 Pro. I have mine sitting right here. And I just wanted to share some of my kind of initial impressions on it. I think if you don't have a TV that has variable refresh rate, at least sort of 120 hertz and 4K ability, I think it's pointless. I really think you need a TV to match this hardware. Just sticking it on a standard 1080p or 4K television is not going to cut the mustard. I think you need something that's going to really use that feature set. The the trailers, because of compression, streaming restrictions, etc., do not do the resolution bumps justice. I think in many ways it's actually the resolution that's the thing that was the most striking. The Last of Us Part 2 Remastered, in particular, looks stunning on the Pro in its Pro mode, which is 1440p upscaled to 4K using PSSR and then running at 60 frames. I then unlock the frame rate because of the VRR, which makes it even smoother, kind of kicks it sometimes into the 70s and 80s frames per second at then upscaled 4K. It looks unbelievable and a noticeable upgrade. I've tried a couple of other games where I haven't felt as big of a leap. So, like, I tried the finals on PS5. Well done, Embark Studios, for such a smooth cross-play integration. Because my PlayStation and Xbox accounts are all tied together, I just signed in, loaded the game, and it found my account, and there was my customization and everything ready to go, which was brilliant. All my VERs were there, all my currencies. Didn't really feel much of an upgrade there. I'd quite like Embark to kind of talk about what they've done with the Pro, because it is listed as being Pro enhanced on the store. I'd like to know kind of what that was. It just looked the same for me, really. I didn't see anything meaningful there. Dragon Age looks particularly crisp on the Pro and runs very smoothly, which is really nice. I feel really sort of happy with the launch library as well, given that what we talked about earlier, that I've got a few games that are kind of sitting there in the wings that I'm going to get to now on my Pro. It's quite a bit smaller and lighter than the standard PS5. I still have my PS5. I'm waiting for my friend Misha, who's bought it off me, to collect it from me next weekend. And it was interesting to be able to side-by-side them. It's a lot more compact, especially in its width, and lighter than I expected too, which is really nice. It's taking up much less space on my desk, so that was really nice. I didn't go for a disc tray in the end, so I don't have any wacky add-ons, and it hasn't sort of altered the aesthetic and spacing of it either. I do firmly believe, I'm not going to give it a score, because I think we talked about this last time, like IGN giving consoles a score, I think is just nonsense. I do think this is very much this is not a necessity product. This is something quite frivolous, and just if you want that little bump or showing your games sort of running in their best possible state, then great. If that matters to you, I don't think people should be rushing out to buy this thing. I think if you're a new PS5, if you haven't upgraded to a PS5 before, the standard PS5 would also do you perfectly fine. I don't feel a need that they've sort of, where the One X felt essential. If you had an Xbox One at launch, and then you upgraded to the One X, that jump on that console, that is fantastic hardware. I think the One X felt like an essential purchase. It was like 200 games that were One X compatible when that thing first dropped. And the jump in its innards and its form factor, both from a design and aesthetic perspective, but just from the content alone, of the tech in it, it was a remarkable jump, that console. I don't think the Pro has the same sort of impact as what the One X did. But certainly from someone as myself who like really enjoys PlayStation first party, those, as you can imagine, are a lot of the games that are supported on the Pro. It started to make me look at certain third-party games like Dragon Age and go, well, I want to get the Pro version because it's going to look closer to PC, and that's great. It's going to bridge that gap really nicely. That's kind of where I've landed with it. It's very much an optional purchase. Some games definitely more of a striking upgrade than others. I think the advertising has done it a disservice, but I also think the form factor and the presentation of the whole thing has been very neatly tweaked and presented. So
yeah, I feel like they definitely needed a first party game to go alongside it. I just it's sensible to do that if you can, but I saw the Slim has had a price a price promotion to $380, which is pretty like alongside the PS5 Pro. It's kind of crazy disparity there between the price points. Like nearly half the price of the
to get the Slim
premium model. And I also saw Argos. If anyone's interested, it's $660 at Argos already. The PS5 Pro. So
nice.
For Black Friday, so worth not a bad cut. But I think if they'd have just done the currency conversion properly from $700 to what it actually would be in pounds, it would be like under 600 quid, and that's a lot more palatable. I don't really know why they've decided to shaft Europe with that, but like you say, with the accessories and stuff, it's expensive. But if you're passionate about those certain games, I think it's always worth looking at this type of thing.
Yeah, absolutely right. I hear you on that. So the final thing from our headlines is we mentioned Embark Studios, who are the developers of the Finals, working on Ark Raiders. This is something, it's a co-op PvE and PvP third-person shooter. First time getting a gameplay reveal. Again, I think closer than we think. I thought this was much further out. They're still continuing to support the Finals, which I saw recently, has had its best engagement in terms of player numbers and retention since it began. So that's really encouraging for that team. But they seem to be going full steam ahead on this. It looks very polished. Definitely leveraging Unreal Engine 5, because it's almost got a bit of the Finals aesthetic in the way the guns were handling and the way they were doing.
There's bits. there's a zip line bit in the
Yes.
gameplay which
Yeah,
has
yeah.
got the same sound effect as the
Yes.
finals. I was hoping the roof tiles would have the same sound
Yeah,
effect, but they
totally.
don't.
It's kind of like the new version of the Killzone ladder slide, right? Like it just gives you that, it evokes that kind of thing.
Yeah,
This looks really, really cool, and I think it's kind of Mike John doing a Burly Bird System
yeah.
Link stream bait. I think like this
I,
is yeah.
yeah, it looks like the finals. I think if you were in first person, you'd struggle to tell it apart from the finals. But obviously, there isn't destruction, and I'm not convinced on the shooting doesn't look great to me. But I always struggle a bit with third person
Mm,
shooters, so I think would just need to get a hold of it. But the traversal and the way the kind of gameplay comes together in this gameplay sequence is really nice, and I like the kind of going into buildings and clearing the buildings to complete your
yes.
objective and stuff is really nice.
And that sort of
um
hub area
and
that you deploy from, I thought was a cool idea. And you know, this actually, again, I really appreciate the warts and all. Yeah, that's definitely, this is all the finals, baby.
yeah,
I really appreciated the deep dive on this. We're 3 for 3 for trailers in the last few days, where they've shown HUD, they've shown digging into the menus and what that navigation looks like. I love that stuff, and put all the this is an alpha work in progress watermarks that you want all
yeah,
over it, as much as you want to remind people that it's still in development. But just the animation, the roll on the landing, it sort of just looks very slick, and it's got that kind of animation polish that I've come to expect from that studio now, certainly from off the back of the finals.
yeah. This bit
really
was cool shooting I think they're called wasps, these things. You can tell that's going to be really satisfying to
Take
like
'em
ping
down.
those, and they kind of fly
Yeah.
down into the ground. I wanted to like, because it looks like the finals, would you be disappointed if you, like, say, throw a grenade at the tree and the tree doesn't fall over? Will there be an element of
Yeah.
that? Because, like, I can understand a building's not being destructible, but I feel like if there's no destructibility at all, um, that would be a bit jarring for me. Having it feel, because it does look like the finals graphically, because it's obviously the same team. Um, but I don't know. I wouldn't know what to
Mm.
expect. You'd at least expect there to be physics in the, like,
Like the environment.
environmental items. But
Yeah.
yeah, like we got a bit of that in the finals, but they're very much like objects that they place.
Yes.
There's a few objects that have physics, and the rest of it is just, well, there
Just
aren't any
dressing,
other
isn't it?
objects in
Yeah.
the game really. Um, but yeah, it's free to play as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
Which is nice. So it's interesting that they're kind of going all in on that, where I think most teams, most publishers especially, are kind of shying away from it now. I think unless you're confident your game's going to be really big, free to play is a bit risky at the
Mm.
moment. Um,
Yes, and actually, if there's some kind of crossover with like the same currency, perhaps that the finals uses, if you could perhaps, like, because you could earn currency from a finals battle pass that then could be spent in Arc Raiders, that could be a nice way of encouraging that community to stay invested. I think. I mean, that's not confirmed, by the way. That's just pure speculation. I just think that would be a really cool concept.
well,
Um,
on that as well, it seems like a no-brainer to have this as kind of in the same world
mm,
as, obviously, the finals is like a virtual reality game show. It can be completely, very limited crossover with this, but it just makes sense to me to have it in the
yeah.
same world. Like, somewhere in this universe, there's people in the finals game show thing.
Yes, totally.
And maybe we get like those sponsors. You find a bottle of drink from one of the
From one of the
final
sponsors.
sponsors
Yeah,
dotted around the map. That'd just be nice,
that'd
wouldn't
be
it?
nice, and I think it doesn't need to be any more than that. It can be quite
No.
superfluous, kind of Easter egg stuff. I don't need that huge context for that, because the finals doesn't have a campaign. But I agree. I think the sort of the branding and just feeling like you're in the world. I thought this looked really strong. I think the camera swapping, the movement,
Yeah.
the vaulting over stuff looked really slick as well. That's something I really judge my third person shooters on, is how slickly can I navigate the environment, and how smooth are those transitions. Seems to be here, just looking at some of the long grass stuff as well, that there's some stealth going on as an option. Some nice variation in the environments too. So yeah, I am very excited to check this out, and it's just a sort of another tightly developed, sort of polished extraction shooter. Always on the lookout for something like that. That's a co-op win straight away. That robot, the spider robot, by the way, gave me Generation Zero vibes.
Yeah.
Great title that you and I we played a good 15 hours of that. We had a great time in there.
I think the graphics look great in places as well. I think with Game Pass,
Yes.
and obviously some publishers are, I don't know, kind of anti Game Pass model. But I think if you're doing a free to play game, then obviously Game Pass has no impact because it's as if the game was available on Game Pass. You have some stuff like Overwatch, which is a Game Pass game, even though it's free. But I think it encourages.
You get all the characters, like you're like a Valorant.
Yeah. But I think people that wouldn't ordinarily pay for like consumables and things. I think are a lot more likely. That Game Pass has had a benefit of you have a whole audience of people that wouldn't normally pay for consumables are then more willing to pay for consumables in their Game Pass games. And I think by extension they're also willing to do that in free to play games like the finals and this as well. And it's kind of changing that mindset because I would personally never it just doesn't interest me buying cosmetics or anything for games up until really Game Pass launched, and now kind of anything goes with that because I don't buy many games at all, so I've kind of got that sort of gaming budget there for spending on the
totally
games
and that's what they want too. They want the engagement from the sub, seeing the download, seeing the player base and the subscription numbers, but also then that secondary spend is more likely because it's a smaller ask of players. It's much, I have no qualms coming in with a £7 battle pass if I know that the game is obviously free to play and that some of my other games, my bigger titles, are being subsidized by their Game Pass inclusion. So yeah, absolutely. I think that contributes to that mindset and certainly makes me more willing to jump on a microtransaction or a skin or a battle pass of some kind, because if it's something you want to keep invested in and you're going to be sticking around. That's why the finals, I have no problem buying that battle pass because I know I'm going to play it and I know it's going to be my in the essential category of my gaming.
Yeah, I need to buy some cosmetics really in the finals. I've been putting it off for so long. I feel like I'm kind of betraying my
betraying the love. Yeah, totally. So our deep dive tonight, we're gonna kind of get into this Phil Spencer just blowout. Really, it was some pretty definitive statements, which actually we might not necessarily, and I can't wait to get your thoughts on this, but we might not necessarily like the answer, but we're getting answers. The central pillar of our criticism has been the lack of communication, the lack of a clear strategy. And unequivocally, Phil Spencer has now said nothing is off the table when it comes to ports to other platforms. Halo could come to PS5.
It explicitly says about Halo. I guess they asked him about Halo, but he said, we haven't decided about Halo, basically.
I think it's switching to Unreal Engine. Very portable. Its Slipspace engine probably was dreadful for trying to get on other platforms. Glad they moved away from it. Hey, all bets are off, baby.
Do obviously the handheld news was the other bit. I don't know if we want to tackle handheld first.
Yes, let's get into that.
But it was also just quickly. He seems to have a thing about Bloomberg. But the first one that went out was Bloomberg. He's done interviews with a few places, so I think there's a question separately. We could maybe talk about it quickly at the end. Why has he done this set of interviews now? It's interesting, as opposed to just doing like one a quarter with different rotate the publications. He's kind of done a raft of them all at once. I think possibly because I think he was in New York for something, and maybe that's where they're based. But it's still notable that at a random time of year, obviously it's big Game Pass time, but relatively random time of year, he's done all these interviews.
Yeah, and I think actually, if nothing else, if we're looking at timing now, we're seeing that run of positivity. We're seeing some good stories. So actually, again, I can't remember if it was Gamescom or the summer, but he did that IGN interview, which was basically crap because it was just it's an Xbox, great. Yes, it is. And it's just. But then also, I don't entirely put that on Phil. It was a wet interview anyway. There were softball questions, and it was poorly.
You can't blame Phil for not giving
soft answers to soft questions, right?
Yeah. But whereas this, I assume he could basically have said whatever. He could have said, we've talked about our strategy with other platforms, nothing's changed. He could have just said that. Satya Nadella said a while ago, which we covered on the show, like, we're going to continue our strategy with bringing games to other platforms. That's fine. But Phil went and said there's no red lines. Like, why do you have to be that explicit? There's so many different ways you could word that.
Totally.
To not instantly make people think, fucking hell, Halo's going to go to PlayStation.
Totally. And that would be, you announce Halo as a port, right? Just make that as a specific announcement. So let's look at that then. I think if Satya's going to come in and say we're going to continue the strategy and it's vague, and so much of the criticism of Xbox has been either a lack of focus or a lack of clarity, or both. We now have that. We might not like the strategy necessarily.
I don't see this as clarity, though.
Absolutely I do. So
because
this is interesting. Let's get into this.
So that what he said is any game could go to PlayStation, but we don't know what games.
Right.
But so that's not.
So I think let's not confuse though clarity with specificity. He's clear that everything is on the table. We haven't got specific port announcements yet, so specificity is lacking, I agree, but there's clarity in what Xbox's vision is, which is exclusives don't matter.
That's not what he said though, is it?
No, it's not what he said, but that's what I've taken from that.
I agree he said everything's on the table, but he hasn't said we're going to bring everything to PlayStation.
No, not at all. No. But I think
just if business conditions are such in certain circumstances, there could be a situation where Halo goes to PlayStation.
Yeah.
But that's not the current situation because Halo's not on PlayStation currently.
No, but then I suppose look at the response they had to Indiana Jones. Now, I think I partially blame Jeff Keighley for that and the way that was handled. The one more thing, sort of like a wink to the audience, like you'll be excited, and it's like what? But equally,
must have known.
They've surely read the terrain. They've seen the controversy and the backlash to that. Don't then follow that up by saying, "Hey, Master Chief Collection, PlayStation 5 in July." That's not how you follow that. What you do is you do exactly what I think Phil has done. He's made absolutely the right move here, which is to say, when we get there in 2025, 26 beyond, when we're ready to talk about Forza and Halo and Gears coming to other platforms, we have said explicitly early anything was fair game. So guess what? We're now ready to announce that at the time is right. So we have been wanting clarity from them. We're hoping for further specificity going forwards. We have clarity from them. I really believe that, which is that now I think we have clarity on their approach, not on the specific ports and in what order. The approach being is Xbox now is beyond consoles and beyond games tied to a box. They just want to make money anywhere they can. And much like the top 10 games, we have unpacked already, where none of them had exclusives in them. None of them. PlayStation, Xbox, there was no exclusive games in the top 10. They were all multi-platform games, free-to-play games and stuff from the previous gen. So the data points to The Last of Us isn't shifting boxes meaningfully. Halo isn't shifting boxes meaningfully. So Xbox is getting ahead of that curve and saying, okay, we're going to put our games in the most places that will make money. And if it means having a timed exclusivity window to get the most out of our Game Pass subscribers, and then we make some money elsewhere as a second hit, we're going to go to the places where we make money. Sony are doing the same thing. They're just doing it slightly differently with a different release cadence by putting it on PC, say, a year later. And obviously the sales of their single-player games continue to be incredible, and the critical response is equally great. But they're not suddenly causing... there's still 50% of PS4 players that haven't upgraded. And the exclusives aren't moving that needle. So actually, I think this is just Xbox reading the terrain. They've now said very, very clearly, anything is fair game. And that now is... I feel like this is finally, they have picked a lane. After all this time, all this sort of like this, the leaks and the court documents and the speculation and the insiders telling us that Forza was being ported or Starfield was being ported. All of that can just be now put aside because now we know what Xbox's vision is. We now know what it is.
I don't agree, but
okay.
I can see what you're coming from, but I just don't. So because we don't know how the interview went, it's not a transcript of the interview. If they said to Phil, can you tell me 100% that Halo will never be on PlayStation? And his response was, there's no red lines. That's not the same as saying, if they asked him, what's your approach now to third-party games? He says, well, there's no red lines at all. Like, anything can go to PlayStation. They're complete, depending on how it's been. And I also don't think Phil has just come out in the interview and said, hey, just to let you know, there's no red lines anymore. We're bringing everything to everything at some point.
Let me see if I can find the quote, because I agree that does... The context of the question affects the usefulness of the answer here, right? So let's look at that.
I think the no red line statement is... I wouldn't have expected him to say anything else, because he certainly doesn't want to pigeonhole himself into a situation where people are saying you lied. You said Halo was never
right,
because like might be Halo 8, Halo. You know, it could be years away that Halo goes to PlayStation. I don't think we should necessarily read this as next year all of Xbox's first party games are going to be on PlayStation, because he hasn't said that. He's just said in a no red lines means he wouldn't want to guarantee that like anything is off the table.
Yes,
I think again it depends on how the interview was worded, but I think based on the timing of the interviews, I think there's something coming to PlayStation that would make people cross, unless it's in relation to to try to temper the Indiana Jones thing some more. But I think it's more likely that there'll be... I've said Forza Horizon before. I know you didn't think Forza Horizon was likely, but I think Forza Horizon is the sensible one. If you're talking about the main, untouchables, unless it's about Starfield and he thinks there's going to be blowback from Starfield, but I personally don't think Starfield would get blowback at this stage. But
I have to revise my position on this now because of what he said. We don't know what they are. That is a fair point. We don't know the games, the timing. No ports were actually announced today or over the last couple of days. But his direct quote was... Hang on. This actually loads.
I read the Halo bit. The Halo bit was bad. The rest of it was...
yeah. His... I'd love to be able to tell you this was actually working as intended. When asked about was there anything stopping any of the company's games coming to Nintendo or PlayStation platforms in the future? Response, I do not see sort of red lines in our portfolio that say thou must not. That's his exact quote. So I think now it comes down to... Okay, Xbox, this is your pitch now. You want to become, one of the biggest third-party publishers ever, while still making your own boxes. They become Game Pass boxes, and that part I think I haven't changed my position on that. That's what Xboxes are for now. They are for the convenience of not having to dick about with a PC setup. Your Game Pass sub is there. You're getting really bespoke, well-designed bespoke hardware. There's going to be a core audience for that. A small audience relative to the other platforms, but 30 million Xboxes are still 30. That's not a failure. It's just not the market.
Well, and
leader,
those,
right?
Just quickly on the numbers, when GTA comes out, Xbox will get a huge boost. It won't be the same boost that Sony will get, but the Xbox people that have a digital catalog will move to Series X and S. It's definitely going to happen when GTA comes out.
I agree. Yeah, absolutely.
It'll give it a bump.
And the pros will probably they'll sell out. The PS5 Pros will sell out for sure because they're still available. They didn't sell out of those pre-orders. The 30th anniversary edition did, but they've got plenty of those. The Argos, like you said, are selling them for that slightly reduced price. PlayStation Direct still had them up on launch day. They were still there. So
I think it was the same last gen with the Pros and the Xbox One X as well. They didn't sell out.
They didn't sell out either. I still actually, when I look back on that, I think that might be one of the best designed consoles they've ever made, the One X. In terms of the jump up from the One, that was a bloody good refresh. That
I mean, getting sidetracked. They needed to do it because the Xbox One is
a toaster.
It's hard to believe that you still get games released now that can run on the base Xbox One.
Black Ops 6 runs on the Xbox One. leave it alone, you know. But that's I think it's such an interesting thing. I think now we know unequivocally this is the approach. Everything's fair game. Timing is the next question. So we can put aside now if maybe, you know, I hope those insiders just shut the fuck up about all of this stuff, about what game's coming. I just, it could be anything.
But it's not going to happen because it is still case by case. Which
it's going to be now. It'll be like when it'll be the what specifically the timing of not how long after.
It's not. Yeah. But it's not when. It's not when because you can't guarantee that the next Halo will come to PlayStation. That's not what he said. It's not a question of so that when the next Halo comes out on Xbox, how long after that will it come out on PlayStation? That's still not what he said. He's just said he can't guarantee that it's not going to come out on PlayStation, and he wouldn't guarantee it's not coming out on PlayStation. They're not the same thing. I think when they did the 4 games, whatever it was, interview video, that was problematic because he did the smug Phil Spencer face saying it's not Starfield, and it's true it wasn't Starfield, but I think he's probably regretted saying that because they obviously want to bring Starfield out on other platforms, and although that was in reference to the 4 games, it's not a great look to then bring Starfield out on PlayStation.
Think from a business perspective, though, this is actually probably guaranteed we're going to keep getting Xboxes. We're going to keep getting the console hardware in the ecosystem we want. Because they're making their money beyond the box now. And
but I think if they're losing money on consoles, and making their money on PC and PlayStation software, then it doesn't make sense for them to keep making Xboxes. It's like I said before. I think they'll end up farming it out. Maybe not next gen, but the gen after to have other manufacturers make the hardware. But I don't think it. So far, they haven't. Their revenue isn't going to be many percentage points higher than it would have been otherwise because Sea of Thieves came out on PlayStation. I don't think they've really had an impact, a huge impact from bringing their first-party games out on PlayStation. We haven't really seen it to an extent where it will affect their kind of bottom line. Obviously, Black Ops, but that was. It's not the same thing because that's a multi-format game. But
no, and I suppose then those early like Hi-Fi Rush and Sea of Thieves weren't necessarily going to move the needle either. In terms of they'd had a huge player base already. So I suppose that's the experiment to see if there was even an audience for them at all. And then their top tier franchises, Starfield, Halo, Forza, Gears, I think they would generate significant income for it. Especially, you put Master Chief Collection on PlayStation and PlayStation players can access Halo. For a lot of those people that abandoned 360 in the PS4 era, I think a lot of those, that would absolutely generate not only player base, but they're not putting Game Pass on PlayStation. By the way, just to say that now on a stream, you put Game Pass on PlayStation, there won't be any other Xboxes because nobody would buy one. They would just buy PlayStations. You could have PlayStation exclusives and Game Pass streaming if it was maybe cloud only or something.
Yeah,
crazy. Yeah. Don't do it.
Sony wouldn't want it.
Well, they wouldn't want it anyway. But I'm saying is if Xbox money hatted them, everyone's got a price. Don't do it strategically, is what I'm saying. That would be a huge mistake. Make Game Pass your bet.
Yeah. I think the only way it would happen is if there was some sort of competition thing. If Microsoft
like a mandate, but they had to.
Yeah, if they stopped making Xboxes and it was like a subscription like Netflix, and they argued.
Oh yes,
that
yeah.
You have to let it be on your box
because of Activision, because of that. Yeah, totally. Davo coming into chat saying Game Pass is definitely Xbox's main selling point. Absolutely, there's no question now.
But so when I've said Forza Horizon, and I think Forza Horizon will do really well, and you're like, oh, it's old hat. But then you say Master Chief Collection will do really well.
Yes, because I think PlayStation already has their racer. I don't think they have their shooter.
They're such different games, though. Gran Turismo and Forza Horizon are so poles of like Forza Motorsport. Absolutely, there's no place for Forza Motorsport on PlayStation.
Oh, fine, yeah, that's fair. Yeah, Motorsport, I think, is too much of a crossover. Horizon, I guess, less because they've got the wacky festival stuff and it's more off-road and yeah, I get that.
I think I don't know. Maybe I wouldn't want to stick my neck out. I think Forza Horizon would do better than
Oh, man,
Master Chief Collection.
I'm 4 feet wide, sticking my neck out right now. Come on, buddy boy, let's go. But yeah, yeah.
So just quickly on the handheld, because I think we've got slightly different opinions on this. Originally, because Sarah Bond said this
news.
holiday we'll be announcing hardware. It will be the biggest technical leap. And they've had to ride back on that. This is what this interview was.
Do you think, just on that really quickly? Do you think, when we got the digital Series X and the 2 terabyte special edition one, was that the hardware?
Yeah, I think it was.
Oh,
Jez Corden basically said that was the hardware, but I think also because she said it in the same sentence, that the next gen will be the biggest technical leap. People were like, "Oh, so you're going to announce hardware and it's going to be the biggest technical leap?" But it's like we're going to announce a shitty Xbox that looks like you spilt paint on it.
Like a weird Pebble Dash, wasn't it? Like, it's so odd.
Really expensive.
I know.
But we were talking about, would we get that handheld at the Game Awards? Obviously, that's basically.
Nope.
I wonder if that is the purpose of these interviews. It's before the Game Awards, so people know. A, don't expect hardware at the Game Awards. B, Keely's got a fucking Xbox game that's coming to PlayStation to announce, possibly. So be prepared. Maybe Starfield at the Game Awards coming to PlayStation.
Like some kind of, maybe like a reveal, a teaser of the second DLC expansion in 25, and that is like a September launch with an Ultimate Edition that packages in Shattered Space and the original game for PS5. That'd be a guess, I think, for that.
Yeah, I think that's pretty likely. But so now, I think based on, because I think Phil has said it's going to be at least a couple of years before the handheld gets announced or released. Do you know what he said?
I can pull up the quote.
So my opinion of the handheld has always been that at the next gen, the Series S will be the handheld. There will be a lower spec device that like exactly the same as a Switch, basically. And then the Series X will still exist in next gen. There'll be a higher spec home console that doesn't have a portable mode. And this to me seems like it fits with that. But I know you were talking to me about a mid-gen, it coming in mid-gen.
Yeah.
Which is an interesting idea.
Yeah, that it sort of occupies that space. When we haven't seen them do what PlayStation did with the Pro. We haven't seen a 1X equivalent for this gen. It seems to be they're moving away from the console mid-gen refresh, that would sort of end up picking up the mantle for that, allowing them to have a single SKU at launch, which I think PlayStation had a huge advantage there, having PS5's digital and disc versions have identical spec. I think it just became about whether you wanted digital only or disc. Very, very smart.
Well, they didn't have stock, though, because they were using the same parts.
True, but then also they were the market leader. They were going to sell out. Xbox didn't. Great to have the option, and Series S obviously was a nice stopgap for people. But the exact quote from Phil: longer term, I love us building devices, and I think our team could do some real innovative work. But we want to be informed by learning on what's happening now. So they're happy to sort of R&D it and let it cook, is what I take from that. And actually, I call it a mid-gen refresh. Maybe it's less looking at it like a refresh and more about the timing of its release. I feel like mid-gen, we would see the handheld drop. Launch with a single SKU. It's one Xbox, one console. And then, like you said, sort of a Series S equivalent in the sense of it being a lower-powered native device. Not just cloud streaming, although it would support that. We see that come in 2, maybe 3 years into the next generation of consoles. Things do change, don't they? When you look at where people's actual preferences lie, for a lot of people, especially when you look at the top 10, we mentioned before about most games being either from the last gen of consoles or free to play or multi-platform releases or all the above. A lot of people will go, I like the controller on PlayStation better. I want to buy a PlayStation. that is, for a lot of people, that is the reason why they do it. I love Game Pass. That's the deal. I'm getting a Series S. I don't need an X. I don't need the 4K. But I'm getting an S because of Game Pass. Or I've got Xbox. I had Xbox Live on the 360, so I want to keep my profile going or keep my backwards compatibility matters. Exclusives just don't seem to be moving the needle and be system sellers for them in the way that they used to, especially because PC seems to have exploded into the mainstream. And you look at the player numbers there for a lot of big third-party games. You look at how successful the ports have been for both Xbox games releasing day and date and PlayStation's subsequent releases. PC, I think, is the big factor. Nintendo need to be just taken out of this equation. They are just their own thing.
Yeah.
There's a whole different fan base with a whole different IP. So if exclusives aren't doing it for either platform, for the market leader, PlayStation, or for Xbox, the whole strategy completely makes sense. You just, what your differentiation now is in services and the way your hardware is pitched. That's the real point of differentiation now.
I've said before though, I think that the issue, especially that Microsoft have had for the Xbox One generation, was that their exclusives just weren't good enough. And I think Sony have been fine basically because the exclusives have been really good, but they've still had a problem, especially recently, where they're all very similar.
Yep.
They've been making the same like
sequels.
Not quite paint by numbers exclusives, but they're all whatever they call it, the single player experiences. And Xbox, the best Xbox games have all been kind of multiplayer leaning. Well, but it's basically been Forza Horizon has been the only really good first party game that we've had, and then you have stuff like Halo and Gears, which are still multiplayer focused. But it's been the case that if you love single player experiences, you basically have to gravitate towards PlayStation. If you love multiplayer experiences, you have to gravitate towards Xbox, unless you can get a PC where you get the best of both worlds. But I think the strategy, if PlayStation put out like a killer multiplayer first-person shooter,
Killzone
everyone
Online
wanted to play
or something,
Yeah, that was went viral and had crazy numbers, and maybe it was on PC and it got some attention from there. Then I think you'd find Xbox people more feeling like they needed a PlayStation, and vice versa.
Yeah,
I think Xbox tried it with Hellblade and it didn't work, but there's a lot of single player games coming up on Xbox that could start to entice some of that PlayStation audience if they don't put all the games on PlayStation.
It was the quality and quantity, wasn't it? We weren't getting a regular enough release cadence, and when they were coming out, the review scores, the critical response wasn't touching what PlayStation were doing. So it's taken years for them to address that, and you can see the growing pains. You can see the strain they've had in terms of being able to actually establish that regular process. And you look at the biggest title coming out the end of this year for Xbox was Call of Duty Black Ops 6, an acquisition of a well-established franchise. Indiana Jones, as much as that deep dive was great, I still think it's swimming in 8s, actually. I don't think it's going to be that sort of 9 and above that you'd expect from a Horizon, Last of Us, God of War, etc. Sony have missed, mainly with their live service titles. They've relied heavily on second party, like Helldivers obviously was a huge success for them. So I don't think there's any sure bets on their side. Certainly for the last year, it hasn't been as confident as we've seen in previously. But that's always been Xbox's issue. Is sort of there's a reason you and I bought so heavily into their ecosystem, into their subservice, because of the promise of what was to come, and it was just too far between. It never bothered me as a consumer that Hi-Fi Rush suddenly went on PlayStation. It didn't suddenly make me less interested in playing on my Xbox. If anything, it reminded me what great value it is to have had that day one. But it always boils down to the games. It's just us separating, I think. It's so important now to separate the idea of exclusives selling hardware in the same way that they used to. Because everything is connected, everything is cross-play, it's just a different game world that we live in. Separating the exclusive selling hardware argument from the quality and quantity of the games argument. Those are two separate issues, and I think the exclusivity one is rapidly going away with PC, like you said, being the best of both worlds. And then the quality and quantity issue, Xbox have had up to this point. It always felt like, the running gag, wasn't it? It's like, well, next year, we've seen the coming soon, it's coming. I think Fable next year is the shifter. I think some PlayStation players, especially if they know they might be getting a Halo Master Chief Collection in there somewhere, Fable would be that, you know, if that drops as a 9, if that's a 9 and it's coming in really strong, and Xbox are like, you know, bullish, and they're like, well, this is at least a year exclusive or something like that. As we said before, you know, give us a 6-month window, give us a year window, or just paint that picture clearly. That's something that they need to be clearer on. Definitely, you know, how long will Blade be exclusive? If Indiana Jones is 3 months, it's for Lucasfilm Games. Is that always going to be the deal? You know, there's a lot of clarity around that still needs to happen. But Fable could move the needle, especially if it's, you know, it'll be Game Pass Ultimate day one. So that's what Xbox have missed, I think, is that sort of killer app, not to shift boxes, but to shift subs and get that audience.
Yeah, and it's a slight blemish on Phil's record, really, because they've had opportunities, they've had games that should have even going back to like Sunset Overdrive and things that
Quantum Break.
Yeah, had the teams behind it to do the job. But like Halo Infinite, we all thought Halo Infinite was going to be the return to form for Halo. It wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
Starfield should have been the game. It shouldn't have been Fable. It should have been Starfield, and they dropped the ball. That was their chance to get people over, because it's still exclusive, you know, console exclusive. It just wasn't good enough to do it. But if it had been Skyrim quality, if it had got the headlines that Skyrim got and the player numbers that Skyrim got on PC and Xbox, like unquestionably you would have had lots of people. Well, we also have to look at it a bit differently, because I don't think we'll ever see people that have got PlayStation saying, I'm trading in my PlayStation, deactivating my PSN account, and I'm going over to Xbox, because they'll lose all their... That's just not going to happen anymore. You'll get people buying an Xbox to go with their PlayStation, or maybe playing on the cloud, or getting Game Pass and playing on some other device. It's just not realistic to expect people to switch completely, and I think that's why price. We've talked about price of the next consoles will be really important, because more than ever people will have multiple consoles, and if there's a cheap way for people to play Xbox, and maybe there isn't a cheap way for them to play PlayStation, that will be a real advantage, I think.
Totally, and especially if the SKUs are simplified. If it's this is the Xbox, this is the Xbox Next, this is the PlayStation 6. If that's a clean argument, and there isn't sort of different SKUs for them at different price points, they'll just sort of compare like for like. However those prices come in, I think, will be where people end up leaning towards. It's a very interesting time for us now, and I think going into the end of this year, going into next, something like, say, South of Midnight, which is on my personal sort of most anticipated list, I think that critically moves the needle for Xbox. I do have a good feeling about it, that it's going to be well received. I don't think it becomes the Game Pass shifter or the market share change at something like a Fable or the next Gears, potentially. Love, by the way, quick shout out to the fact that the original voice actors for Dom and
I saw.
Who's his partner? No, Marcus, I was right. Marcus and Dom. The original voice actors coming back for E-Day, which is just great. Instant PR win for that game. You've immediately won people over who are like, it's a prequel to Gears 1, and you're bringing back the original voice actors. Beautiful. Like, that's great. Whoever was managing that title, I was like, just, you know, what an obvious, easy win. So well done for that.
Troy Baker to do it.
Yeah, as Indiana Jones. But yeah, that I think South of Midnight critically moves the needle for them. I don't think it would move it, say, commercially, massively. But I do feel like suddenly people take notice. Oh, we've had Doom. We've had South of Midnight. And they'll sort of look at that and sort of think, okay, that's interesting. Xbox have something there, which might then come a year later. All bets are off. Fable becomes the mover, I think, next year.
And talking about quantity, if all these are decent games, and there's no like Redfalls and things in there, or at least not too many, and PlayStation have basically not put out first party games. You know, we've had bits and pieces, exclusive deals and stuff, but you will start to get a weight of titles that have come out on Xbox, and you haven't really had anything on PlayStation. I still think up to now, PlayStation's had a better year than Xbox, even with the limited lineup.
I agree.
But by the end of the year, Xbox would have had a stronger
and Xbox lineup, by far had the best showcase I've seen in years in the summer.
Totally. next year on Xbox looks much better than
Yep.
PlayStation, but I expect PlayStation to announce quite a few things
Yeah, and actually, yes,
coming out
I
next
think
year, hopefully.
Naughty Dog will start to show their hand. Bend Studio will start to show their hand. Probably Santa Monica, rumored to be working on new IP instead of God of War. You'll start to see that. Whatever's next from Guerrilla, we don't actually know that yet. So there's a few big hitters that they're going to have towards the end of their gen for sure. Um, the the big thing I think now for Xbox coming into the end of this year, going into next, is that then if you maintain that exclusivity window, however long or short, I still think Indiana Jones should be longer, so we can. That's definitely open for fair debate. But you start to also chip away at people going, okay, so I know that Halo could come to PlayStation and Indiana Jones is coming, but it's 3 months later, it's a year later, it's 6 months later. Xbox starts to develop that perception as being the first place to play, not the best place to play. And that does matter in this very I need to be first era that we live in. That suddenly sort of chips away at the perception, much like the power problem, wasn't it? The 360 was always considered more powerful than the PS3 because of the PS3's innards. PS4 massively outstripped Xbox One because that was the general perception. So many people switched over to that. I think that would help Xbox too in terms of the consistency of their release cadence. That does start to chip away at the perception of people thinking that actually we're getting Indiana Jones we know is going to be, like, that's not an open for speculation. We know that's coming. It's been announced as such. But it's still going to be 3 months early on Xbox. And you could get it on a cloud streaming on your PC. You could cloud stream it, which probably would, I would imagine, a first-person single-player offline game would probably run pretty well on the cloud streaming on PC as well, especially if you're wired in with my coiled serpent of an internet. But that's gonna move the needle. People are gonna dip. They're gonna dip in for a month or two there, and if you have enough, then Avowed's hitting in February, potentially Doom in March, and you know.
Also, these people are still currently in their first month from Black Ops,
Right.
and you'll think, oh, I might as well just keep it another month and try Indiana Jones.
And then I got
exactly. Might as well. Just very quickly, isn't it interesting how the perception has shifted with something like Death Stranding, where people had no idea that was going to go.
Yeah.
People just thought that's a PlayStation. I actually thought Sony owned the IP to it.
So did I.
Well, I think they did, and I think it's been transferred. But it didn't leak. There was no question about it at all. And then as soon as it comes to Xbox, it does really well because people are like, "Oh wow, we've got this game that we never expected."
Yeah. By the way, I didn't even blink either. Like and that just shows you how commonplace these ports have become. Is that, like, I saw Death Stranding coming to Xbox and went, "Cool, okay."
I was the opposite. I was completely amazed because I didn't see it when it was first announced. I thought literally, wow, it's a Sony game that's being put on Xbox, and then obviously you read into it and it's Kojima's IP, so it's fine, and not that noteworthy, but just interesting. Where, like, Sony are very good at this, like, keeping their stuff locked down. No one knows exactly how long stuff's gonna be. Even when it's like Final Fantasy, like Black Myth Wukong is. I saw just while we've been on in one of the other Phil interviews, someone asked, "Is Black Myth coming to Xbox?" And he said, "I can't say," which means it is.
Right? Yeah.
And he can't. But so Sony are great at having. Even if something is going to Xbox, they're like, "Oh yeah, it's going to Xbox, but you can't talk about it." Whereas if I feel like the other way around, Xbox are like, "Yeah, Jeff can talk about that whenever he likes.
Yeah,
he can do a big announcement."
Cards close to your chest on that one for sure. I get that. It loses the pageantry and the excitement around it. It's a fascinating time, and I think it's given me, I think, for the first time in forever, clarity not just over the library of games that are in development, but in the strategy of their release. It's given me clarity on that without specificity. I'm loving that argument, but I'm
glad you have clarity. That makes one of us.
I do, yeah, because it's clear, not specific. That's where I've landed with that, and I'm happy to John lock in. It also creates a new cycle opportunity too. You said it best earlier. It avoids the criticism. of it being a surprise, of it feeling like a rug pull moment. Because he then goes Master Chief Collection, is announced for PlayStation 6 months from now. It doesn't feel like a rug pull. You know?
I have to say, I will still be amazed and shocked in equal measure if Halo or Gears go to PlayStation in the next 3 years. I'll still be completely shocked.
The next Halo does.
Okay.
The next Halo does. Not day and date. Let's lock in a bet.
Well, you're talking about Master Chief Collection. Come on.
No. I just threw that in. So I don't
put
think
your
so.
neck out. Come on.
It's off screen. My neck's over here. So I think it's the next Halo that actually comes. I think we see that it's a new release. I think they're
well, that's going to be 5 years.
That's going to be out there, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah.
So what's this clarity giving you?
The clarity of Phil Spencer's approach, which is that he's not going to look at the portfolio wanting to make some extra doshins on stuff that's already seen its maximum player count and revenue earned. He's not looking at the portfolio going, well, obviously not that one. That's what's giving him clarity. Yeah. And he said that.
So Gears E-Day.
Ooh, yeah. Maybe because also it's a prequel too. What a good chance to get in a new audience as well. I'm all for it, man. They're making money. They're making more bank. It keeps my Xboxes coming out, which is where I want to be. So, make it so. Phil Spencer. No, up here. Give it one of those. Get that. Make your bank,
Seems
baby.
Like a good place to finish.
This is great. Well, listen, thanks so much, everyone, for tuning in to the latest episode of System Link. I'm joined, as ever, by my co-host, Mike Hazelson from the Xbox Guide. You can find us on Threads. No longer Twitter. We've sacked that off. You can find us on Threads, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Spotify, and Discord at Burly Media. Mike, where can the folks find you?
TheXboxGuide.com and Threads at the Xbox Guide.
Lovely, and also on YouTube now as well. You've got a YouTube channel going on. Let's not forget.
True.
Indeed. Thanks everyone for tuning in. Lovely, lively chat tonight, which is really nice to see. And we will see you this Saturday for some Burly Bird Live. Not again, we've no idea what we're streaming. Please be excited. Thanks, Davo, for the feedback there. It's really sweet of you to say. Thanks, buddy. We'll see you Saturday. It'll be 9:15, 9:30, just depending on technical wonkiness. Keep an eye on our socials. We'll let you know exactly the timing in the games. And we will see you then.
Yep.
Cheers, folks. Take care.